2. Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. I am back from Cincinnati just in time to get ready for the next show on the Lamar Jackson tour stop here in Baltimore. Deshaun Watson comes in, which gives me a chance to catch up with lots of my friends in Houston. I did not call them and bother them because when they were losing the World Series, I was chilling out in Maui and Kihei. So I did not bother Stephanie Stradley or John McClain or any of my other friends down there in Houston, Texas. But this is the week. She is Steph Stradley out on Twitter, fiercely covering all things Houston Texans, and sometimes running with various animals with political backgrounds. And she is a lawyer by trade, a great conversationalist as well, and she drinks wine, which is necessary when you watch football on the weekends in Texas. We welcome her back in, one of our defending champions. Always good to have you aboard. And, city by city, when Houston comes, I'm like, I'll deal with Steph a couple weeks from now when we see Deshaun Watson. These are the fun days, right, when the teams are good and everybody's trying to bring back the fountain of Moon or the memory of Dante Pastorini. This is a nice little matchup we have this week in the National Football League, right?
Completely. This is like video game stuff. I mean, we are so blessed to have this experience. For so long, Houston Texan fans haven't had a quarterback that's worth buying a jersey for, and that has changed with number 4. I mean, if you don't have a quarterback in the NFL, you're lost.
Well, and then you have to keep him upright, right? Like, as you guys found out, I remember 2 years ago when all things looked new for Deshaun Watson, and, I had McClain on, and he'd never seen anything like it, and they're winning games, and then things stop, with an injury, and there's always that period coming back. I mean, we saw it here with Flacco. I was in Cincinnati the other day where the Carson Palmer thing happened. These in-season things that really sort of rock your world, probably change the way you play. There has not been one storied NFL person I have talked to since the Lamar Spinorama on Sunday who has not sort of tempered my Michael Jackson shirt with the thought of, hey, dude, he's a running quarterback. Wait till he gets hit. And around here, it's heresy, right, until he gets hit. But such is the game, and living on the edge is what you guys have been doing for 3 seasons, right?
Well, I have to say the flip side of that is, there hasn't been a lot of studies done on running quarterbacks versus quarterbacks that stay in the pocket. But really, one of the number one places that quarterbacks get in trouble is when they're in the pocket and are throwing the ball and get hit right as they throw. Well, I mean, that has nothing to do with running. But if you look at actual quarterback injuries, that's one of the fundamental places where quarterbacks get injured.
Well, out in open field, they have the ability to just curl up. I mean, Peyton Manning, became one of the Ninja Turtles late in his career, right? Like, literally, that was a move. It was sort of Peytoning, which means, hey, dude, I'm getting down. You're not going to hit me, and if you do, you're getting 15, right?
Yeah, and then also it's just knowing when to take chances. And, I think that's one of the things that, the coaching staff here has been doing. And, that's just kind of risk reward. But, yeah, it's a violent sport. Sometimes, stuff happens, whether you're running or not running.
Steph Stradley covering all things Houston Texans. So give me the Houston Texans report. We're all wrapped up in my purple mania here, and we got Matt Skura on Tuesday at Jennings. We're up in Aberdeen next week. We got Josh Bynes, who wasn't even on the team 8 weeks ago. We've remade our defense here amidst all of this, and Flacco, Weddle, Suggs, Mosley, none of those guys are here anymore, and yet here we are. Tell me about the Houston Texans and where you are in Week 10 in the world that formerly was known as J.J. Watt's world, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of strange in that, you got to the end of training camp and you're like, okay, this offensive line is bad. The secondary is bad. Your wide receivers are, DeAndre Hopkins and people that can't necessarily you can rely on. And then they just decided to make some big trades. And they got Laramie Tunsil, who it's nice to have a left tackle that actually looks like a left tackle. They brought in other players that have, fit different roles for the team, because I think part of the problem that the Texans have had is that they've either been too old or too young, and some of their promising players are young, but they didn't have any like really quality vets to go with them. And so that's one of the things that they've been kind of trying to do is either bring in some quality vets, bring in some young, promising players, and see what they can do with them, ones that fit into, what they need to do. Because, like, right now, we're not exactly sure what Texans team is going to, compete for the rest of the season because, they have their bye week this week. We won't find out really who's going to be playing until the day of the game. But, they needed the timeout. Like, their bye week came at just the right time. I mean, Deshaun Watson was playing with an eye that got stepped on. Like, I don't know if you saw that play.
He completed the pass, right?
Yeah, that happened right in front of where my seats are. And, I mean, basically he's really strong, like in a way that you don't necessarily notice, just escaping the pocket. Somebody kicked him in the eye, and in slow motion you can see him check to see if his eye's still there, adjust his helmet because it swung around, and then completes a touchdown. Like, he does 5 things a game that I've never seen before, but I'm sure that you guys have been seeing the same experience there.
Well, Romeo Crennel, you bye week, you do some self-scouting, and you get ready for Lamar Jackson, and you got to go tackle him and figure out how to get him on the ground. We thought maybe, Kansas City, teams with running quarterbacks, so Seattle, that there would be an advantage to seeing this style, knowing that you're trying to get Deshaun Watson down to the ground in practice, allegedly, if he's wearing a red jersey or whatnot. But extra week, good luck with this. Watch the hips. The first move's a bitch, man. I'll tell you that.
Well, that's the thing. They're like watching Army if Army had a bunch of plus athletes. Like, I mean, obviously the offense is not exactly the same, but Baltimore runs something that other teams don't run, and they're running it with plus athletes. So there's no preparing for it. Like, you can theoretically go, okay, look at what they're doing and, maintain your lanes and da-da-da-da-da. But, good luck. I think sometimes fans don't really have a sense of how small secondary players are, for example. I mean, the Texans have some bigger secondary players, but I mean, most secondary players are like my size, only faster, much faster. And then when you're being asked to take down a quarterback of size who has just as much speed as you do, that's hard.
Well, that's why it's a National Football League, and the geometry of it, right? That Lamar sees space and has known where he could get to all of his career, right? Which is how he got here, being that elusive guy. But that spin move, the part that boggled my mind when I watched it at 4 a.m. when I woke up, because they just kept playing it over and over again, all night on the coverage Sunday into Monday, and I woke up in Covington, Kentucky on Monday morning. I don't recommend it, Steph. But after the Cincinnati game, and it's just watching the feet. They kept showing him on the podium and doing his little spin thing, and I'm sitting 5 feet away. I'm actually the guy he was talking to, who'd ask about it, and the issue there really was the feet, that if you watch the replay and where his feet, if you're just watching him as a dancer, the way his body torques at full speed and then the acceleration, that's the part that's sort of otherworldly.
Yeah, he doesn't slow down.
Well, Barry Sanders had that, right? And that was a gift.
But Barry Sanders is substantially smaller. I mean, this is going to be a test. I mean, I fully suspect that the Texans will do what they tried to do, or what they did against Kansas City, which is to try to keep the other offense off the field. Because right now, the Texans' defense is all about team defense and not any individual players. And the best way to help a defense that's been struggling is to keep them off the field. So, the Texans have a lot of, they run a lot of plays, and they try to play keep away. And, they're going to have to until Now they might not be able to do that if Baltimore puts it on them early in a game, and then it's just going to be a full boogie shootout. But, they've played different kinds of game scripts throughout the year. They've had games where they've scored a lot, but then they've also had games where they've controlled the ball and relied on their defense a lot. But I don't see, they can't rely on their defense this game. They're going to have to keep Baltimore off the field.
Houston Texans coming to town. Steph Stradley covers the National Football League and the Houston Texans, and I am her guest on her questionnaire this week. You can follow it at the Houston Chronicle. You can follow her at Steph Stradley. She's also an attorney in the Houston, Texas area. I guess, last thing for you is that I think of this team as Hard Knocks. And by the way, I really hated that Hard Knocks. I thought it was so overwrought, and J.J. Watt with the music and the tie. It made me want to barf, quite frankly, because I felt like it was just sort of overdone.
It wasn't real. It wasn't real.
It was terrible.
First of all, it's like 90 degrees during training camp. So the whole time of Hard Knocks, I'm avoiding the camera altogether. But yeah, when they're showing J.J. Watt in slow motion, and it looks like he's on the field by himself. No, he wasn't on the field by himself. You show anybody in slow motion, it looks more dramatic, Yeah,
but there are very few of the protagonists still. I mean, OB is still there, but the protagonists from that series, I feel like it's a completely different kind of football team. I guess to your point, it was so defensive led and defensive personality led, and. Make an argument about Deshaun Watson, but I would still say DeAndre Hopkins is the most talented guy they have, and most people would tell you Laramie Tunsil was the number one player, in the draft. We shall see. We shall see, right?
I have to say that Deshaun Watson is the most impressive individual. Like, someday when I grow up, I hope to be as mature as he is.
Nice. I love that.
He really, truly is an amazing individual. Of course, like all young quarterbacks, they're learning, they make mistakes. But, I think he's only in his whole career, maybe lost 2 or 3 games by more than a touchdown. That's crazy. And, whenever you watch him, no matter how far they're down in a game, you never feel like they can't come back because he just has a way. He can score very, very quickly with just a couple plays.
I hope that I remember that when they're losing by 17 points on Sunday in the third quarter. That I'll remember these words, that they're never out of it. We hope to find that part of it out. But, I mean, there's no doubt the respect that I think the league has given him over the last couple of years. But then you have to go out and win games in January, and you have to play in Super Bowls, right? That's the ultimate measurement for all of it.
Yeah, and I think part of the issue for him last year is by the end of the year, everybody was hurt. Even DeAndre Hopkins got hurt in the playoff game, but he was relying on rookies, and he had no skill position players back. This year, they actually do have skill position players at tight end, at wide receiver, at running back, and what's nice about it is, from week to it's not nice if you play fantasy, but what's nice for the Texans is they can change what their game plan is based on what they're seeing. And so some weeks it might be a tight end week, and some weeks it can be a wide receiver week, and some weeks they can really lean on their running game. And they don't only have one way that they can play offense. So it's interesting to watch. It's not so much as DeAndre Hopkins has quiet days where he's putting up a bunch of yards, but it's not only DeAndre Hopkins, which it's been for many, many years. And I mean, I think that's the fundamental thing. All the Texan teams under O'Brien, you can just throw them out the window. Deshaun Watson changes everything. And when he has skill position players around him and understands protections a little bit better and has some talent, at offensive line. They drafted 2 offensive linemen, and then they got Laramie Tunsil in. They have been focusing on it. Now, can they fix it in 1 year? I don't know about that, but they're in a much better position than they've been in any year under Bill O'Brien.
You mentioned what a good man Deshaun Watson is, and that organization and coming back, into play, and losing the ownership, and what went on politically at the end of his life, and the knee, and everything else that's going on. J.J. Watt has stood larger than life, not just in the hard knocks, but throughout the league and charity and the aftermath of natural disasters, and being from Wisconsin and being the kid with education ties to him throughout. What's the prognosis for him over the next 5 years as a football player in that organization, and his ability to do it at the kind of level that we saw with Ray Lewis and Terrell Suggs around here for a long period of time? I mean, he's had long stretches of his career taken away from him, as did some of his other defensive teammates that were very highly thought of earlier in their career as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really difficult because, the only thing that really can stop J.J. Watt is J.J. Watt. And, he's not had the same issues over and over. Like this year, he tore his pec. His season is over. But before he did that, he was as good as any defensive lineman in the country. Like, even after he was out, he still had, I think he still had like the highest tackles for loss number, even after he had been out games. I mean, he's an incredible player. He is a bright person. So he loves the game. So the question is, how long does he want to play? Because he's going to play as long as he wants to play. And I think he can play at a high level as long as his body doesn't break down. And, the bigger concern is, his back. You can repair different things, but, your spine's kind of hard to maintain over time. And, he clearly is somebody who could excel in things not football. Like he is a brilliant person.
She is Steph Stradley. She's also brilliant out on Twitter. You can follow her at Steph Stradley down in Houston, Texas, as well as at The Chronicle. Just want to turn it to baseball and give you a little oxygen on that, because I know that's the other pastime down there when your team is winning and playing in World Series and playing in 7 games and losing to the Washington Nationals. As you know, I've done a lot of work on the Masson side and what the Washington Nationals mean to my town and the future of my baseball team, which has 23 months left on its lease at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. You're a lawyer.
Really?
You know what that means. Oh, yeah. See, the things you learn when you get on the radio with old Nestor in Baltimore, right? 23 months left on a lease here in Baltimore, no one going to the games, and sort of like the Blutarski school of Astroball of 0.0 level of interest in a team that's lost 110 games 2 years in a row. So, we're going into year 3. I've read Astroball. We've seen it all sort of play out, but it's been quite the renaissance in your town, and I don't know what a second World Series there would have meant. It certainly meant a lot to D.C., and it's going to mean a lot to Baltimore that D.C. won. Probably nothing good to Baltimore, quite frankly, but you're in the middle of that renaissance down there. How's that Astroball thing going for you?
Well, it's really strange rooting for a team that is favored. Like, my whole life, I have never done that. Like, so it's really kind of a hard, it's a weird feeling to have.
Yeah, the Oilers were never going to beat the Steelers, right? Like, ever, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, their juice wasn't as good.
Yeah, I was an Oiler fan, I know. So
yeah, so you know the deal. So, going, like, from the first, like, before they even started the season, the Astros were favored to win the whole thing. So it was just a question of, okay, can they do it? And there's a lot of things that you have to have in play to make that happen. And, it's when they didn't win Game 6, I was like, one game for all the marbles. I'm not liking
was
that.
Zach Greinke as well, yes.
Well, he actually played.
He was great.
Played fairly well, and really, in the games where people got hits off of him, it's not because he was throwing bad pitches. Like, there were not very many bad pitches. This was just a phenomenal World Series with some great pitching.
I had an afternoon every day where I stuck my head somewhere in to get a score, get a beer. I was in Hawaii, going to my first trip over there. And quite frankly, I did not need to see the Washington Nationals win a World Series in my lifetime. It's been a little painful with envy here on this side. You know what I'm saying?
The flip side of that was I was packing to go to London for the Texans-Jags game during Game 6. And so I wanted them to win Game 6 because I was going to be in the air over the Atlantic during Game 7. And that's where I was. So I went to sleep not knowing the result. And then you can check live TV, but there's very limited live TV sources. So when I was landing, that's when I found out the news. And I'm like, you know what? This is not a bad time to be out of town and not listening to sports talk. And I didn't really need to see that, I guess.
Well, yeah, I skipped the parade myself. I'm on to other things like Lamar fever here in Baltimore. Steph Stradley joining us from the Houston Chronicle. The Houston Texans coming in to face the Ravens this week, and Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson getting together. It's always great to visit with you. Stay warm down there in Houston. I know when the temperature gets below 60 degrees, y'all freak out down there. Don't worry. Global warming will have it warmed up for you anytime now, okay? Hang in there.
I guess. I was just waiting for some fall. It skipped from summer to winter.
I love me some Houston, man. I will be down there to visit you soon. My cousin lives in Katy. I always know the weather's better than here right around this time of the year, certainly around Christmas and January when it gets real cold here. Houston's a place I can hang. For on a climate level, I'm all in.
Oh, there you go.
See you, Steph. Be well. There she goes, Steph Stradley at the Houston Chronicle. She's I'm actually working with her this week, doing some Ravens insider stuff for the Houston Chronicle with her question and answer later on in the week. So you can check that out. Matt Skurr with us on Tuesday night at Jennings Cafe in Catonsville. Would love to see come all out in the land of the Ville in the 21228. Also, next Monday night, we will be with Josh Bynes at Adams Jeep in Aberdeen. The Ravens in first place, Luke's in Owings Mills all week long, getting you ready for the Houston Texans. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Astro Ball and Baltimore sports.